Okay. So this presentation is the one that I gave at the Transformation Conference in Arkansas, which is the Ozark Mountain Publishing Transformation Conference 2 weeks ago. And it was well received because there's been a lot of thought about what's going on with the Ascension. So what I'm going to talk about is what happened with 21st of the 12th, 2012, and the dates are really only estimated milestones and what happens surrounding dates. That really Ascension is a gradual process, and it actually ends up being a tiered level of process, which is both individual and it's collectively achieved. Okay, so it'll give you an understanding of how Ascension is working. And the information within this presentation, by the way, is based upon three articles that I wrote and submitted to a number of different spiritual magazines in the UK. And initially, they were refused because they were before 2012, 21st of the 12th, yeah. And the response from one was, excellent article, but we don't want to put the fear of God in them. So it was, and then afterwards, I submitted it in February this year, and they took it and they've published it in their papers, which is great. I also want to give you some proof that we're ascending, because one of the things that we don't see is the proof that we're moving up the frequencies. And this is important because we actually are. It's you know, and people need to understand that. And then I want to go through what our ultimate ascension destiny is. And this is a long way off, by the way, but it's going to give you an understanding of where we're going to be. And it's something that I've gained during the meditations I've taken with the source and with the origin, in terms of the books, some of the information that went in the books, the history of God, mostly in Beyond the Source books, but also specifically coming into the book I'm more than halfway through now, called The Origin Speaks. So it's all new information that's coming out, and the clarity of the information is getting improved every time. So I'm getting, you know, concepts, and then the concepts are being, you know, being narrowed down into the finer detail. So, what are you lots doing here? Why didn't you ascend?
Yeah.
What happened to this mass ascension? Okay? Let me go over that and explain what's going on, because it's important. Most of us really thought, you know, we've got all these people, these spiritual people of note, of plenty of respect. We're saying that we're all going to go up in different frequencies on the 21st of the 12th, 2012. And as a result of it not particularly happening, and the Earth appearing to be exactly as it is right now, a lot of people are feeling a bit despondent and a bit concerned. Was I not good enough to ascend? Am I not of the right quality? You know, why am I still here when people that I thought wouldn't ascend are still here and I can still see them? So it's leaving us in a completely confused state, isn't it? We're thinking, these people have been lying to me all this time. What's going on? And people who've been broadcasting the information have been doing some serious backpedaling and trying to regroup and regain their credibility. So really we need to understand the higher level process and allow ourselves to actually get our confidence back, because that's one thing we do need as spiritual people who are working with spirit and working with the path and helping not only ourselves and the group here to ascend the frequencies, which we are, but also the rest of mankind through association. And the association is to do with this triangulation effect, and I'll explain that in the rest of the satsang. So I'm going to remove the confusion, basically, because it's very important to remove the confusion and give you a thought process to work with. And not only you can work with, but you can say, yes, I understand it and it works. Actually, ascension is a slow, gradual, robust and repeatable process. The large changes that we expect can't happen and will not happen because it's not sustainable. We can't maintain it. It's not achievable. I'll explain why in a moment. But first I want to tell you about what actually happened about an ascension. The ascension, or should I say the frequency increase that was broadcast as happening on the 21st of the 12th, 2012, actually happened in February. The level that we were supposed to have achieved happened in February. But why didn't we feel it? Why didn't we feel this sudden jump? It's because we've been doing it slowly. And we've been getting used to it. So we don't see what we get used to. Okay? So really, these dates that we get from Spirit are estimated milestones, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
Now the thing is, when we get dates from Spirit, they talk about certain periods of time where things are going to happen. But really, time doesn't exist. Mankind is the only incarnate civilization that's managed to invent a metric for something that doesn't exist. So how can we, ask Spirit to give us a prediction on something that doesn't exist? It's like asking somebody who's never driven a car before to suddenly drive in a car and be able to drive down the freeway and do it without causing an accident. It's impossible, isn't it? So what happens is we get information, it's broadcast without the individuals going into the depth of actually what's happening, and so we get errors, and therefore these dates are misinterpreted, and the events come and go and we miss them. Now, a gradual ascension is preferred to a cliff, what I call a cliff face ascension, that we all like to have. Now, cliff face ascension is when we go from zero up to a level and then we continue to do our work. Okay? But, and I'll explain in a moment, that relies on a critical mass of individuals. But we can just as easily have a cliff face descension. Okay? If we can go up, we can easily go down. And it's important to note that this is just as easy to happen. Okay? It's easy to go down as a mass as it is to go up. And if we did this, if we went up together and we all experience things, and we all experience heightened functionality, heightened ability to sense things, we could suddenly do telekinesis and teleportation and change the molecular structure of our body so we're younger again, reminding ourselves what we were like when we were 16. Wonderful thought process. And then that was taken away from us. What would we do? It'd be horrible, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
What would we think about that? It would really affect our confidence in all ways and shapes and forms. So, actually, we're flat earthers, aren't we? If you think about it, we think in terms of a linear progression and then sudden steps. So, when we think about when we're going to achieve certain things, we think that when we travel down a certain road linearly in clock time, we think, well, if we get down this road, this path, at some point we're going to be there. And it's going to be up like this. So we think to ourselves, we're going to ascend at a certain date and bingo, we're there. Okay? So we think about things in a linear sense. The problem is, as I said before, this requires a critical mass. This means that we need to have a specific number of individuals, all the same quality, all of the same spiritual development, all of the same evolution, to be there at the same time. And it creates it needs it's a big jump in frequency as well. So we need to have all these people collected together. The problem is this critical mass needs to be maintained or we descend. Yeah? And you only need one or two to drop out of those frequencies, to become intoxicated or attracted to low frequency existence again, and we descend altogether. Yeah?
Wow.
How many times have we had the stories of mountaineers, where there's been 8 or 9 mountaineers climbing up cliff faces, putting their pitons in the rock face, and they've been scrambling up the cliff face, and then one falls, and they pull all of them down. Yeah? One falls, and if the pitons aren't properly inserted in the cliff face, the lot come down. And this is what can happen. This is what does happen and has happened in the past in other civilizations. So we're being given this the opportunity to do it in a more robust way. So let's think about what's happening. When we work with frequencies, we work with it on a daily basis. Not only a daily basis, a second by second basis using clock time. We think about things, we work with things, we change our thought processes, we get involved with like-minded people. We only associate ourselves with like-minded people. We slowly move away with individuals who we've probably loved and still do love for a long period of time. Friends, relatives, family members who are very close to us, such as brothers, for instance, or even husbands or wives. And we start to move away from them because their thought process doesn't specifically meet where we are. And as we do this, we actually move up in a gradual basis. So it's like us walking up a hill gradually. Okay? It's like us moving slowly up this hill and eventually getting somewhere. So when we say, at this point, I start, and at this timeline, I'll reach that level. When we're walking up a hill slowly, we gradually go up the hill, and we get normalised to the height of the hill, don't we? We get normalised to the altitude.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the same with the frequencies. As we're moving on, we're gradually getting acclimatised to them. So things start to happen to us on a gradual basis. We get acclimatised to more intuition coming through, more sudden and clear sentience coming through, clairvoyance coming through bit by bit, and we start to get used to it. We don't notice it so much because it happens on a slow basis. It comes to us gradually. Can any of you ever remember anybody complaining about getting boat lag? No?
No.
Boat lag. What's boat lag? Exactly. What's boat lag? Oh, you've heard of jet lag?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, jet lag is when we move from point A to point B, crossing lots of time zones quickly. So we take 7 hours to go from the UK to Newark, for instance, or even 12 hours to get from the UK to Los Angeles. And because we're moving so fast, we come down the other side, we move through 8 time zones, for instance, going from the UK to Los Angeles. So we have to work with the environment where the sun rises and falls at a different time period, and we have to get used to it. And we're tired. It's a different time zone. We have to work with that. So we've got this phenomenon of jet lag. When we use boats, and we still do use boats, of course, to cross the Atlantic from Southampton to Newark and those sorts of areas, we did it gradually and slowly. We slowly got used to the time zones, and so when we got to Newark, we were in the time zone. So we didn't get boat lag, and therefore we didn't recognise it as a phenomenon. So it's not been there. So. And this is a good example of what happens with our ascension process, our gradual movement of the frequencies. We get used to it, so we don't get ascension lag. We would get ascension lag, you know, this sudden step change from being normal individuals to being, you know, psychics or superhuman individuals, if we did a mass ascension in one go. So really, ascension is a gradual process. It's something we do on a gradual basis. But the thing is not to worry about what you wanted it to be. Okay? Think about how you want it in general. Think about how you want it to be. What your expectations were based upon what everybody else was thinking about. Just think about, well, actually, I'm an individual and I'm ascending in my own right. I'm working on myself in my own right. I'm progressing in my own right. So it's more important to think about what you want it to be and how you expect your life to be and work with it. Make it your reality. So commit yourself to assisting in its acceleration from a personal perspective, and remove the need for this incarnate experiential experience, such as wanting Mercedes-Benz cars and expensive watches and Gucci clothes and those sorts of things. Clearly you can have them, provided they don't intoxicate you, and you must have them, and nothing else counts. And that's the most important thing. So it's this level of thought processes, plus other things like forgiving people, irrespective of whether they're enemies or friends or people that you would not even associate with, is part of creating a gradual, repeatable and robust ascension. It allows us, though, if we stand back and use something that's called the observer self, we stand back from ourselves and observe what we've done in neutrality, to see these changes, to recognise these changes and go, aha, I am ascending. I didn't, you know, if you look at where you were 5 years ago, even 2 years ago, or even a year ago, you think, well, actually, I wasn't like this a year ago. I was a different person. I couldn't do this a year ago. I'm a different person. Then you start to think about where you are, and you start to see that actually you have changed. It's been so subtle that you can't see it. But, you know, let those changes happen. But it also allows you to, if you are observing yourself, to develop in a non-egotistical way and work for the benefit of others. And working in a non-egotistical way and being of service to others is really the first step to pursuing personal ascension. The very subtle things that we do and how we operate with people is part of the personal ascension process. Well, so in terms of what happens next to us, well, it's up to us really to ensure that what we work with and how it affects us and how it affects them and how we work together is achieved, and how we work, and how we assume, we continue this continual process, and how we work with it. So it's important that we observe what we do, how we affect each other, how we affect ourselves, and how that which we work with affects us from a subliminal perspective, in a, if you like, a return loop situation, because sometimes that which we do to affect others can affect us as well. So we need to make sure we are observing how we interact with people, and how we interact with the world as well, and the nature and the animals that we care for, and the people we care for, and the world that we care for, because that also helps with our ascension process. So this means that we need to look at how our behaviour patterns affect others as well, because how we work with ourselves and how we feel about ourselves and how we progress with ourselves increases our frequencies, and this works in tandem with the energies associated with something called triangulation, which I'll explain in the rest of this satsang after this particular presentation, because we gain frequential elevation through association with others. Okay? If we meet somebody who's more spiritually evolved and we work with them, we're pulled up to their level by association. And as we work with others who are below our level, frequently, they're pulled up in some way or some percentage way to where we are. So all of this association with people and how we respond to people and work with them means that they get pulled up to our level, and how we respond with others who are above us means we get pulled up to their level. So the ascension process and how we work and how we behave with people affects not only ourselves, but it also affects those around us. So we have to be careful how we think. What we think affects ourselves and affects others around us. So if we're working well with each other, everybody helps. And this is part of this collective ascension, this group ascension, this mass ascension, where although we work individually, we are affecting each other collectively. And we will affect each other collectively, provided we work individually. So, we're human beings right now. We're incarnate in a human vehicle, which is in a material existence. And we like to have physical proof, don't we? Yeah? we like to be able to touch the table and go, yeah, that table's there. It's solid. I can knock on the wood and it's there. Somebody tells me if I push that button over there, the light comes on, and I go over there and push the button and the light goes on. Yes, I can see there's proof there because I've actually done it myself. Experiential proof. If we were told by somebody that if I push a button on a wall, the light comes on, but I've not seen this button, I've not seen this light, I've not seen them do it, and they said, believe me, it works. You're working on a belief system. Isn't that what most religions are based upon? A belief system? Where's the proof? Totally. Where's the proof? Yeah. It's only when you're allowed to walk into the room where the switch is and the light, and then you see them push the button and the light comes on, and they push the button again and the light goes out, and then you can have a go yourself. Wow, then you can remove the belief system and you've got an experiential based system. Knowledge based on experience. So let's give you the knowledge, the experiential knowledge that you've all experienced that proves we're ascending. Okay. So actually there's a rise in the number of individuals becoming interested in things of spirit. Have you noticed that? Have you noticed how there are people out there who weren't previously interested in metaphysics, the origins of religion, spiritual work? They're starting to become interested. That's because the work that you're doing and the people around you are doing, who are becoming interested in spirit, are affecting, through this triangulation method, those around them. So they're starting to rise up through the frequencies and get interested themselves. Some of them are actually perceiving entities of a higher frequency. Some of those are not from this particular planet, they're also incarnate entities, but they're a higher frequency, and therefore outside of the visual range of our physical eyes, but they're nevertheless there. But because they're using their spiritual eye now, they're starting to see those entities that are a higher frequency. So they're starting to experience things. People who you wouldn't have associated with being spiritual are becoming aware, and in some instances awake. The rest of us are starting to get more detail. We're starting to get more depth in our meditations, more contact with the greater reality. We're becoming more aware and awake. We're getting more experience on a more frequent basis. But it's slow, but we're getting there. We're starting to get increased pieces of information. But also, more importantly, look at the technology that's around you. Look at how things have increased in technology. We're not doing it. We're getting it from somewhere else. So, individuals who are semi-aware, and by semi-aware I mean they're semi-aware, but they're aware, but they're not aware that they're aware. What does that mean? They're subconsciously aware. They're turned on in a way that allows them to operate in the material world in a material world way, but they're picking up information whilst they're asleep. Things like scientists, okay, who are getting gut feelings about doing things, intuition about doing things, to do complete U-turns in their experimentation, in the development of certain things, that are making us have quantum leaps in that which is around us in technology and medical stuff. Yeah, starting to use homeopathy, starting to use naturopathic methods, starting to use energy healing. Some of these are, you know, hard and fast, dyed-in-the-wool doctors that are starting to say, well, actually, there's something more in this. Classic example is a gentleman called John Piriakos, who's now ascended his physical body some years ago, but he developed a filter system along with his wife, Eva Piriakos, who was associated with two others, Susan and Donovan Tasenga, and Barbara Brennan. Those of you who know the Hands of Light books and the Light Emerging books, they worked together. And John Piriakos initially developed a set of filters that he could put in front of himself and his patient that allowed him to see auras. Yeah? Eventually he didn't need it because the filters were a prop. They were a focal point for him to use, like a tarot card, for instance. Yeah? Yeah? They gave him something to focus on and a belief system to work with. When he eventually started to experience it a lot, he took the filters away. So it's, we move in a way which is based on experience. Now then, those who are ascending will appear to not be physically there to those who are taking a slower route. So they appear to disappear. How many of you have bought some clothes in a shop, you've gone to the person behind the till, and they've ignored you, and then somebody's come behind you, and they've served them first. And you go, what? Well, is this person their friend and they're showing them personal preference? Yeah. And then later, somebody else comes along, seconds later, and they're served first. And you start to get a bit frustrated then, and annoyed. Your frustration and your annoyance pulls you down the field. And they go, oh, sorry ma'am, or sir, I didn't see you there. Whoa, how often does that happen? Yeah. How many of you have been cut up in the car when you're driving your car? People just pull out in front of you and they don't see you, they have to suddenly brake. That's because your car, when you get into your car, assumes the frequency level that you're on. And you're invisible. Yeah? What about, yeah, the increase in road rage has increased dramatically, hasn't it? Because people who are a higher frequency aren't there on the road. I know people who've got in their car and they've seen a car in their rear view mirror, and all of a sudden the car's disappeared. Where's that car gone? That person's at a higher frequency, beyond their condition, and they've gone out of their visual range. So really you have to be careful about when you're is a higher frequency individual, about how you interface with people. If you really need to have to buy your stuff and get out of the shop quick, I wouldn't say get angry, but just think about lowering your frequencies and you become in their perceptual range, and they'll be able to serve you, and then you can come back up the frequencies again. When you're on the freeway and you're driving and there's lots of traffic around you, just think about being visible to those other people, and you will be visible. So you'll be working with them on a regular basis, because we drop down the frequencies, work with them, and we move back up the frequencies. And this is what's going to happen, and what is happening. We need to move up and down the frequencies to move in and out of what's going on. So let me talk about this process in a bit more depth, because yes, it's actually a 3-tier process, and I'll go into some more depth about the progression to the first tier. So those that progress will actually frequentially leave those behind. And those that are left behind will still be able to ascend, but they'll do it in their own time, and they'll also get help from triangulation. So although we're ascending, we think, oh, these poor people, they're not going to ascend. They will be working through the frequencies, but they will do it at their own speed, in their own way. And they'll do it through their own versions of triangulation through us, this ascension or elevation of frequencies through association. And they'll be doing through their own peer groups that are also moving up, but in a slow way. So they will need to continue to get a critical mass to move up. Okay? So what's going to happen is, as we move up our frequencies, there starts to be a gap in those that are required to sustain the environment. The physical environment is sustained through us. We collectively create the environment energetically. Without us believing in the environment and working with the environment together energetically, this wouldn't exist. Yeah? Collectively, us in this room are creating the environment around ourselves. We expect it to be here. So we continuously create it, recreate it as we move forwards. And so do those around us. And it's not just here, it's within and without the multiverse. All of those other universes that are energetic are being sustained and maintained by the, shall I say, the backroom function that we have, an agreement with our source, our creator, to help maintain that which is there. There's other entities, of course, what we call angels sometimes, but what I now call maintenance entities, because they have different levels and different regimes and genres. Archangels, angels, thrones, and all that sort of stuff that are around there. They're also part of the maintenance, but we're like big memory batteries. Together we create the environment. So every one of you creates their own space, event space, and we will work with that, and we have collective event space in which we work together. Collective parallel conditions, collective parallel localized universes. But as we move up the frequencies and we start to disappear out of the view of all those other people around us, eventually, if there's a lot of us moving up the frequencies, those who are a bit slower will start to think, well, hang about, the population of the world is disappearing, what's going on? Whoa, you know, something spooky is going on here. So, and that can't happen because there needs to be a critical mass. So what's being allowed to happen is that other lower quality genres of energetic entity, those that don't normally incarnate with an individualized free will, they incarnate with collective will, are being allowed to incarnate in human form to gain not only a bit of individualized free will themselves and gain evolutionary content associated with it, but more importantly, they're backfilling so that the population appears to be stable or slightly growing. So we don't have this sudden change where the populace of the Earth suddenly starts to wink out of existence to those who are staying at certain levels. There has to be a certain critical mass in this particular condition for everybody else to incarnate. So they will at some point assume our frequential level. And when that happens, there won't be any need for these backfill people, as I call them. They will be allowed to then move back into their own energetic environment and their own incarnate capacity. But they will have gained evolutionary content and they'll pass that back onto their own people. They will go and continue to work in their own environment. These backfill people, you'll see them. In most instances, it's their first incarnation. So they appear to be fully engrossed in the material world. They are singly minded in their desire for wealth, for material gains, for status, for position. And sometimes they're quite low, they're so low frequency that they're aggressive all the time. They don't really interact with us all the time. And there's pockets of individuals around the world where this is happening. Look at the level of war that's going on in the Middle East. Yeah, you know, this is all part of this critical mass of individuals that's happening. Although it would be nice to have these individuals pocketed around the world, in some instances they're collected around certain country states and certain states in different larger country environments. And you can see them. If you tune into them, you can see them. Think about those who are regressive, who, you know, they live in environments which they really, you know, like to live in, but they live in a gangland type of sort of thing. That's the one end of the spectrum. The other ends of the spectrum are that they're people who are wealthy, but they're fully engrossed in the material world, and they will walk over people to get what they want, and those are the types of things. So this tells us that the Tier 1 progression really is for us as incarnate individuals, as energetic individuals incarnating in a physical form, are working on getting our physical forms, when we incarnate, higher up the frequencies. And our goal is to get to the top frequency associated with the physical universe, which, for those of you who've done the Traversing the Frequencies workshop, or for those who've read the books, is the top frequency is the frequency level 12. It's the top frequency associated with the physical universe. And so we can bring our frequencies up to that. Okay? But what happens then is, because we, as an experiment, in a localised and secluded area of the physical universe, will have succeeded in working with individualised free will, all of the other incarnate vehicles will also be allowed to have individualised free will, because it will be proven that going this route can accelerate evolution. Which will mean that we can move up the frequencies faster in all sorts of different ways. And when we incarnate, it's known that we do accelerate our evolution through incarnation. But actually, while we're here, we don't. We almost arrest our evolution because we get stuck in the physical world. We get stuck into the karmic cycle, this being attracted to physical things, to material thought processes, to the desires of, you know, wanting this or wanting that, or having needs for certain things. So we get stuck in this karmic loop. This creates something called evolutionary tension, which is something I've only recently discovered. Although if we stayed in the energetic, we move from point A to point B over a period of time. Because we incarnate, we stay where we are. Now, because we should have been evolving, but we're not, we're stuck in this karmic cycle, this attraction to low frequency existence, we create something called, imagine this as a ball shaking and wanting to move forward, being held back. It causes evolutionary tension. Now, eventually, that gives more and more tension, more and more times we exist here, we incarnate here. But eventually, as we come out of this karmic cycle, and we remove the need to incarnate, this evolutionary tension is lost, and we catapult ourselves beyond where we would have been as a result of that. So in essence, we do accelerate our evolution, eventually, as to where we would have been if we'd have maintained the evolutionary progression in the energetic. But for the moment, we keep ourselves here. But what's going to happen is that when we allow all of these individuals also to have individualised free will, they will go through that process, and they will raise their part of the physical universe up to the top frequency level. And that means that we can all move into the next full frequency, which is the 13th level. And that is part of the second tier of ascension. We move out of an environment that needs 12 frequencies to create it, because it's low resolution, into an environment that needs one set of frequencies to create it. We move into the next simultaneous universe, because we live in universes which are there as part of the multiversal structure. So we ascend into that. And when we ascend into the next simultaneous universe, the frequency associated with that is much finer. The resolution required to create the universe is there already. We don't need additional frequency bands. And because it's a higher frequency set of frequencies, we can work faster. We can evolve faster. So we will very quickly move into the 14th frequency level, which is the third simultaneous universe. Which means that although we're incarnating in physical vehicles, there will not be anything like what we think vehicles are here. But, yeah, what we think of as physical vehicles as being this will be completely different. The vehicles we'll be incarnating into will be so fine, it'll be beyond what we think of as being a gaseous state. It'll be what we classify as a purely energetic state, although it won't be. It'll still be physical, but it'll be so fine, it'll be almost not physical. And when we've got to the point where we've worked with going through the evolutionary process of working with the frequencies associated with the 13th frequency and the next simultaneous universe, which is represented on this frequency level, and then we go to the next level, 14, and we've worked with that and we've evolved past that, we then go on to the next level. So incarnate vehicles will have evolved to the point of not being physical, and therefore will evolve past the point of needing to have physical vehicles to accelerate our evolutionary process. Because when we move from the 14th frequency to the 15th frequency, which is the fourth simultaneous universe, we're beyond physicality. It can't possibly exist. So therefore we will have evolved past the need to accelerate our evolutionary process through incarnating into a physical vehicle to accelerate our process. We'll be on the way upwards. And that means that we are beyond physicality. So the third tier ascension removes the need to incarnate to evolve. We'll progress beyond that, and every part of our evolutionary process will be from an energetic perspective rather than a gross physical or semi-gross physical, spiritual physical, energetic but still physical condition of incarnate vehicle. So, energetically we'll evolve, we'll continue to evolve, we'll accelerate our evolution, because the more evolved we are, the faster we accelerate our evolution, the higher the frequencies we get, the more access to high frequency conditions we get, the more functionality we get, the more opportunity to evolve we get. And it's like a geometric or a logarithmic progression where the more we've got, the more we get, the more we've got, the more we get. And we'll start to skyrocket upwards, up the frequencies, up the multiverse, and eventually we'll get to the point where we will have reached the level that is associated with full communion with our source, full communion with God, reintegration with God without losing individuality as an individualised unit of our source. But that won't stop there, because when we've achieved this, things change. Some of you who read the books will note that our source entity is one of 12. The origin, the absolute, that's in the Hindu text, the all that there is, created these things to help its own evolutionary acceleration. But when we've all accelerated our evolution and we've got to this communion state, as all those entities that were created by our source entity, our God, and all the other entities, all the other individualised units of God from the other source entities have achieved the same thing, we will get to the point where something special is going to happen. So when all the creations of the 12 source entities return to their source, the origin, the ultimate creator, will be ready to move into its next area of self-awareness. Because the origin is this massive, vast tract of space and energy, but it only knows a minute fraction of 1% of itself. It only knows its own backyard. It knows a little bit about its suburbs, but it's not there yet. It doesn't know the suburbs. It knows it's there. It's anticipating the structure. It knows the structure of its own backyard, and it's created the 12 source entities which created us and other entities within their own environments to look into the minute detail of that which is there frequentially, dimensionally, subdimensionally, and in some instances in zones and continuum-based experience. So everything will be there to make sure that the origin can go and spread out its consciousness, its sentient self-awareness, spread its polyomniscience, if I want to call it that, into its next level, spread out from its backyard into its suburbs of its own area. I mean, clearly there's much more than its suburbs. There's a city out there from its own perspective, there's a country out there, there's a world out there, there's a galaxy out there, there's a universe out there, and there's much, much more than that from our perspective of thinking. It is so massively huge, it doesn't even know how big it is. So what happens then? In this new vast expanse, it will need help to experience what's out there. So we will become source entities in our own right. We will become gods, given God, fully fledged God creatorship. We will be able to assist the origin individually as source entities, like the 12 source entities, like our God has done. We will be like our God, rather than an individualised unit of our God. to assist the origin personally and directly in its own quest to experience, learn and evolve, and experience oneness with our origin within its own expanded area of self-awareness, making it sentient, making it wholly omniscient in this new area. And that's it. That's the far future. That's the ascension process that's affecting us right now. That's where we're going to go to, and that's what's ultimately going to happen. It's a long way away, but we are part of, an integral part of, and an essential part of a much, 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 much larger picture. How do you feel about that? We're very important.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
I do.
Right.
Yeah, I do. But I think, you know, as you're explaining this, what comes to me is the old adage, as above, so below. With the origin, as you're explaining that we're going to get there, we're already beginning this now at our level.
Yeah.
And the expansion, the self-awareness, and the growing of conscious awareness, that giving it at this level is preparing us to, obviously, to do with the origin.
Yeah. Think of it this way. We were created by our source as individualised units of it, and there's aspects of our higher self, our true energetic self, which projects into other vehicles as well, to experience the minute detail of that which it is, as a separated out construct of multiverse. As we evolve, we pass that evolutionary content on to our source, to our creator. We don't lose it, we pass it on. And our source passes it on to its creator, the origin. But think of it a different way. The origin is everything, and it created our source entities, our gods, what do you call that? Okay? So our gods are, in essence, separated out energy from the origin. Our origin, so our source entity created us, and the other source entities created other entities. But let's focus on our source entity. Our source entity created us to do the minute detail work. But our source entity was created of origin energy, and we were created from source entity energy, which is origin energy. So we're all individualised units of the origin, really, aren't we? So when you say as above, as below, absolutely. So if you think about it, we're all individualised units of God. Well, we're all individualised units of the origin, the absolute. So everything we're doing is not only for ourselves and our creator, but it's also for our creator's creator. And in doing that, if we remove our individuality from it, it's all for us, because we're all source and we're all origin.
Wow.
So think about that when you're going about your daily business. What am I doing for the origin? Am I doing it in the best way possible? Am I creating a loop to get there, or am I going straight there? Think about it in those ways. Any other questions on it? Any questions? No? Don't worry about how silly it seems, how stupid it seems. The most simple questions are the best.
I have a silly, stupid question.
Okay.
Excuse me. I haven't heard a good explanation for a person who becomes very psychic and can channel and do a lot of different things, but yet they're not that spiritually evolved. Do you have a...
Sometimes we're exposed to things before we're actually ready, and that's part of the experience process. Okay? If you get somebody who is psychic, can do higher functional things, and some of it might be the physical stuff like telekinesis, yeah, or bilocation, yeah, or precognition, but they're not particularly spiritually advanced from a behavioural context. It's